Remember those interactive polls? This one isn't as serious as the last one. But it does lead us into our sermon, although you're going to wonder how it does when we start. You know, this is one of Pastor Johnny's weird introductions. But you can respond by either texting Dr. Johnny at 37607, or you can just go to the website, pollev.com/Dr. Johnny, and go there. So these are trivia questions. And if you were peeking when I came in before I put the covering on it, you would know the answer to these questions because I have the answer to these questions right here. So, do you know who was the co-inventor of the cold breakfast cereal? Was it C.W. Post? Post Toasties and Postman? Was it John H. Kellogg of Toasted Corn Flakes, later Kellogg's Corn Flakes? Was it Samuel R. Mott of the Juice and Preserved Fruit Company? Folger, the coffee company, or Augie Bush, who apparently knew his way around grains because he brewed beer? Which one of these is the co-inventor of the breakfast cereal? Well, you're having trouble deciding between C.W. Post, who started the Post company that did Post Toasties, and John H. Kellogg, who started the toasted cornflakes trend. Actually, Post stole the idea from John H. Kellogg. John H. Kellogg was a doctor, although all of you who were in pre-med would be very, very jealous. And he studied for 2 years at Harvard and got his medical degree. You know, just 2 years of medicine. You know. So you wish you could get by that easily. Let's go to the next question. It was Kellogg, in case you didn't know. Okay. So where was the first cold breakfast manufactured? In Chicago, Illinois, Schenectady, New York, New Iberia, Louisiana, Battle Creek, Michigan, or Hollywood, California? Anybody have a clue? Very interesting. Most of you got it right. It is Battle Creek, Michigan, where Kellogg's is still headquartered to this day. The reason he made the breakfast cereal was because he was the director of a sanitarium. And he was trying to get people on, well, let's see. We've got that question next. Why? Rating number 1 is the most likely and 5 is the least likely. Why was the cold breakfast cereal created? In order to use U.S. grain reserves before they rotted, to provide long-term rations for the military to eat in the trenches in World War I, to develop an alternative to unhealthy eggs and bacon, to use the bland taste to reduce sensuality, or to introduce an easily prepared hangover cure. Which one?
From the top?
The most likely, number 1, the least likely, number 5. I've never used this question on everywhere with the rating, so I don't know how it works exactly. That works great. Is that just one person, or is it everybody factored in? Anyway,
click and press submit.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. All right. So the real number 1 is he did it to develop an alternative to unhealthy eggs and bacon. He was a strict vegetarian, and he believed that any kind of meat and even to some degree eggs were unhealthy, so he wanted to have a breakfast that didn't encourage the eating of meat. The second reason was, the one that you have as second, or tied for second, use the bland taste to reduce sensuality. He believed that part of the problem of people having moral issues, particularly with regard to sexuality, was the fact that they had developed their ideas of desires and sensuality. So, all the food that he liked was really bland food. It couldn't have been to provide long-term rations for the military in World War I because it was invented in the middle of the 19th century. It could have been used to reduce U.S. grain reserves, but he had to buy the corn on the market just like everybody else. And in fact, the corn farmers were very happy when you had the first cold breakfast cereal, Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. Let's do one more question. What religion were the creators of this breakfast cereal? Were they Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Seventh-day Adventist, or Jedi? Believe it or not, the last British census had 1% of the population claiming to be of the Jedi religion. If you've been in line for a Star Wars movie lately, you understand how that might be. You guys aren't easy to fool. I thought because of the vegetarian stuff we might get you with Hindu, but you are correct, it's Seventh-day Adventist. Now, as we go to the PowerPoint slides and get ready for the scripture, I want to tell you this may seem frivolous. Why would we be talking about breakfast cereal when we're talking about how Jesus only is the way to salvation? Well, it isn't entirely unrelated, because the Seventh-day Adventist religion is a supposed Christianity that has not let go of all the rules and regulations, all the commandments and stipulations from the Old Covenant, from the Jewish law. They are still very much focused on what you do and what you don't do. They're focused on diet, they're focused on exercise, they're focused on what day of the week you worship. I don't know how kosher they keep, but basically they kept a lot of the Old Covenant. So today, in Ephesians 2:11 through 22, we're going to be looking at the unique offer, sola Christus. But I want to finish this introduction with this parable from 19th century life. Here is John Kellogg. Whoops. Did the pictures not animate? Oh, yeah. No? It's supposed to be pictures under here. Did I save it for you? Great. I noticed we had some pictures missing in Pastor Tony's presentation.
That was a different situation.
The USB is here somewhere. So I'll tell you without the pictures, and they'll come up when they come up. So Kellogg was a very rigid man. He was so rigid that he believed the worst evil that you could do in terms of your health was to have sex. Even when men who were married, men and wives who were married, came to the sanitarium, he wouldn't let them stay in the same room because he was afraid they would do what married people do, because that would weaken them. And that was definitely a problem for him. And how do you have children if you don't do the deed? So to show that they weren't trying to depopulate the earth, the good doctor and his wife adopted 42 children. Now, I can tell you after, adopting 4 that, that's no picnic. 42 children. And he did it because he wanted to show that environment was more important than genetics. He wanted to do it because he wanted to show that nurture was more important than nature, and that anybody who lived right, anybody who tried to do right, could do right. And so, in the process of adopting that 42 children, there were critics who said, oh yeah, that's easy. He only adopts from the upper class. He only adopts from those people who are intelligent, the healthiest babies, and such like. So in order to prove them wrong, he found the child of a prostitute who had been strangled in a cabin without any heat, and that had been covered by the mother's body, and was rescued by the police, and he adopted that child to be his poster child. And he is the poster child of Kellogg's Health, except that child hated every rule. That child hated everything about Dr. Kellogg. There are rumors that that child actually damaged the sanitarium at one point in time. And when they made the movie, The Road to Wellville, Dana Carvey played the son, George Kellogg, as a crazy man. There you are on the right with Dana Carvey. To show you how widespread his influence was, Amelia Earhart, President Taft, George Bernard Shaw, lots and lots of famous people went to the sanitarium in order to get healthy and to find out about this lifestyle. The lifestyle was, if you eat right, if you do right, if you exercise right, you're going to live a long time. And you're going to be very, very healthy, which is amazing because in later years, when you see pictures of Dr. Kellogg, he is almost as obese. Well, he's probably more obese than I am. So that's very interesting for a guy who advocated exercise. But what I wanted to talk to you about was adopting a son who resented what you had provided for him so much that he rebelled, so much that he refused to obey the rules. And a father who was more concerned about the rules than about the son. So Kellogg worried more, whoops, what have I done?
I think it's the version of the word. Hold on.
Okay. Kellogg worried more about abstinence from meat, abstinence from alcohol, abstinence from sex, and strict physical activities than he did in helping his son feel loved. George claimed that he never got more than 5 minutes per day of his father's attention. That's pretty sad. That's pretty ridiculous. J.B. Phillips, in his book, Your God is Too Small, called the God of Kellogg, the God of people like him, and the God of people sometimes even in our church, the God of 100%. They put 100% on the altar. They misconstrue what Jesus said when he said, "Be you perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." And they assume because God is perfect, they've got to be perfect. Now the problem with this heresy is that the 100% standard takes all the joy and the spontaneity out of Christian lives of those who dimly realize what was meant to be the life of perfect freedom in Christ becomes anxious slavery in terms of what people expect. Or profoundly he says, God is truly perfection, but he's no perfectionist. And 100% is not God. God's involved. God cares. God isn't looking down to see what you did wrong. He doesn't have a clipboard and a check mark to see what you're doing wrong. Once when Hasbro had just acquired Wizards of the Coast, I was working at Wizards of the Coast, I happened to have an old Hasbro polo shirt from a golf tournament I had been in one time with the little Monopoly man on it. And everybody was really anxious. What is Hasbro expecting from us? What is Hasbro going to do? So I parked myself in the aisle with a clipboard in my hand, my Hasbro shirt on, and as people would come by, I would ask them their name and what they did. And of course, they assumed that I was a guy from corporate finding out who was unnecessary. And everybody was talking all over the place, and I only did it for about 15 minutes before I realized I was creating panic. And so I confessed, and we did this. But that's the way some people think about God. God standing there with a clipboard, asking you to account for yourself. Yevon, what is your name, and what do you really do, and what have you accomplished? Basically, that is that God of perfection, that God of 100%. That's not the God we find in the Scriptures. That's not what God is looking for. So, if you want to see my translation, it's in the bulletin of Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 through 22, or read it in your favorite translation. For this reason, remember that you who used to be literally outsiders or Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcised by the so-called circumcision, performed with hands in the flesh. That you were once, at one significant point in time, segregated from Christ, disenfranchised from the citizenship rights of Israel, and alien to the covenants of promise, that is, God's promise of Christ, having no hope and without God in the world. Well, let's stop there for a second and move on. Now, you notice that my translation reads just a little bit different here, because I referred to them as physical outsiders. They were people who were pushed away because of externals. They weren't circumcised. They weren't part of the elders of the synagogue. They didn't fast at the right times. They were physically, externally, on the outside. They were outsiders from what God was trying to do in Israel. They didn't fit like God wanted them to fit. I like this photo because here we have a woman from the outside looking into a big window of a building, and everybody inside that building is looking at something else. So as the outsider is looking in, she is very much an outsider because all the backs are turned to her. And the apostle is saying in Ephesians that as you look from the outside in, that all the Jews, the so-called circumcision, those who thought they were doing what was important, had their back turned to the Gentiles and their need for God and a relationship with God. I think this picture is extremely sad, and I think it's sad because it reflects God's church, God's people, even today. The kind of thing that Paul was trying to avoid. Is it functioning now? Now, in my translation, I use the term disenfranchised. You had no rights among God's people. Alien, hopeless, and godless. Segregated from Christ. Because you're so comfortable in your religion, you don't want to let anybody in that acts or believes any differently. You're so comfortable in your religion, you don't want to be open to those who are seeking. Just like white people were so comfortable in the South. We wash for white people only. We serve whites only. No Spanish, no Mexicans. Help wanted, whites only. Irish need not apply. Japs keep on moving. No dogs. No Negroes and no Mexicans. Boy, I would really be even more offended if I were a Mexican because they've given the dogs top billing and the blacks second billing and the Mexicans last billing. So that's really cheesy. Or even just to show what people were like, Christians only, Jews not. Wow, not even just white people, but even keeping the Jews out. But I want to show you how this works in our lives. Something is not working with us. Well, there's supposed to be two slides that look alike here. They're missing. Wow. I guess I'll have to go for it myself. So we don't have the signs up like this, but we do have the signs up that say, no drinkers, no smokers, in some churches, no dancers, no versions of the Bible other than King James Version, no druggies, no homeless, no stinky people, no this race, no that race, no uneducated, nobody who disagrees with us. And there are a lot of churches where that disenfranchised. No evolutionists, no capitalists, no socialists, no fatties, no sinners. This is the idea of being disenfranchised. You have no right in our church if you're any of these things. That's what some people act like. They may not say it. They may claim in their pulpits that they aren't, but they act in their church like, oh, we don't want anybody like this. We don't want anybody who has a sin problem in our church, even though all of us have a sin problem in our church. But that is the idea. At the beginning of this verse, it talks about being disenfranchised from God's people. Cut off, no rights whatsoever. At the end, it says, without God. What it means is they can't find God because we have no rights with God's people. We don't know what to do. Because we don't fit in church, we don't know where to get the answers. Because Christians are so stiff and push us away, we don't know how to respond. Because Christians are so judgmental, we don't feel like coming to find the God of grace. We are disenfranchised. We are without God. Now, I think you know me well enough to know there's another bracket coming. The other bracket is, in the middle, it talks about being alien to the covenants of promise. They don't understand the background. They don't understand the Old Covenant. And in our case, they don't understand the Bible. They don't understand the traditions. They don't understand the rituals. They don't understand the expectations. They feel like they come into the midst of God's people and they're immediately shoved aside, immediately ignored, or immediately looked down upon because they don't know the language. They don't know what grace means. They don't know what redemption means. They don't know what reconciliation means. They get all confused about the words. And they don't find out about the grace and the love because God's people are keeping them alien. Well, you don't know. You haven't been baptized properly. You don't read the right version of the Bible. You don't sing the right songs. Oh, you're so out of it. Oh, my. If they're aliens to the covenants of God, aliens to the covenants of the people of promise, they don't know what to look forward to. That's absolutely incredible to me. That so many people in our world have lost hope. They feel like the rat in the cage. They feel absolutely like there's no purpose in life. That maybe it's just, get all the joy you can, get all the goodness you can, and get out. Well, that's the way some people live their life. Those are hopeless people. They don't have any expectation of anything happening beyond this life. So, we do have hope, and the reason we do have hope is because of what Jesus did. Well, what have I done? Completely messed everything up. So, we do have hope, and we do have hope because of what Jesus did. He abolished the wall of division. Now, this is one of those cases where we don't understand the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. In the tabernacle in the wilderness, they built a fence all the way around the tabernacle area in order that people wouldn't stumble in to the holy ground and get judged by God. They kept this fence around it. Not only had a fence around it, but they also had the Levites, the Gershonites and Merarites and all of those all round about it, those who were going to serve in the tabernacle, camped their families round about it so that people were even less likely to go stumbling into God's presence before they were ready. Some people think this wall of division refers to that tabernacle wall. But also, if you look at pictures of Herod's temple, you see that there was a wall in between the court of the Gentiles and the court where all the Jews were allowed to get. And I believe this is the wall of separation that it's talking about when it says Jesus abolished, Jesus dissolved, Jesus destroyed the wall between Gentile and Jew. That he destroyed this dividing wall. One of the reasons I believe that is because Jesus used the temple as an illustration. In these verses, Matthew 24:2, 26:61, 27:40, 2:19, and Acts 6:14, it refers to Jesus' promise that if you tear down the temple, I'll rebuild it. And what was he talking about? We know from reading the whole story, we've cheated and looked to the end, and we found out that he meant that he would be destroyed, and as he was destroyed, he would break down the walls between those who were not Jews and those who were Jews, and make it possible for everyone to come to God inside of him. And of course, Jesus was also used to the word being used Because in Ezekiel chapter 13:10, Ezekiel talks about the false prophets and the priests who were people pleasers and how fed up God was with false religion, with those false ideas of what you do, that God says, I am going to send a storm, a rain, everything. I'm going to bring down that wall. Kind of sounds like the former president, Mr. Gorbachev, bring down that wall. And we have to recognize that sometimes there has to be a wall broken down before we can move forward, before we can advance. Freedom wasn't allowed to spread across Europe until that wall and the Iron Curtain behind it, a little further away, came down. That's when things began to happen. So, in verse 13, it reads, "But now in Christ Jesus, you who used to be distant have become intimately close to God by means of the blood of Christ. Because He is our peace, the one who made both of us into one, and demolished, dissolved, destroyed the dividing wall, destroyed the hostility by means of His physical nature, what He did in the flesh. He has nullified the law, the rules and the stipulations, in order that in Him two creatures become one new human being, bestowing peace. And both are united and reconciled with God into one body through the cross, killing the hostility in Him." God will not put up with false religion. And the false religion of today is, I'm doing the best I can. The false religion of today is, if you only do this, you're going to succeed. The false religion of today is, if you do what God says here, God has to do this. And we turn God into the end of a button, part of a vending machine. We turn Him into that. He nullified the rules and the stipulation. Later we're going to read that He became the cornerstone on top of the foundation. Who's the cornerstone? Is it Muhammad or is it Jesus? Well, remember what we've studied, and as we've studied, oh my goodness. So we studied, we found out that the Islamic faith had 5 pillars. You really need to do all 5 of these things in order to have any hope of joining Muhammad and whomever in paradise. You have to do it. You have to declare that God is one and Muhammad is His prophet, the Shafi'ah. You have to give alms. You have to pray, not just pray, but pray using the right postures, the right gestures, and the right rituals 5 times per day. You need to visit Mecca at least one time in your life. All of these things are things that you do in order to let God say, okay, I guess you're good enough. And Hinduism is about what humans must not do with no guarantee. If you're a Hindu and you do wrong, what happens? You get karmic payback. Karmic payback means what? You weren't good enough, so we're going to have you come back as something else. You haven't made it. You aren't good enough. You got to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and it's all about you. Buddhism is all about what humans must and must not do in order to possibly someday achieve harmonic nothingness, whatever that is, nirvana. But you will notice that it is listening to what the Buddha said, following the Buddha's advice, walking in the Buddha's path, doing the best that you can. But Christianity is about realizing there's nothing we can do for ourselves. So God had to do it in Jesus. And Jesus is our guarantee. The Muslims can't tell you there's a guarantee. They say, I hope. The Hindus can't tell you there's a guarantee. They just trust that eventually, time after time after time, they get it right. The Buddhists recognize that you've got to run this strict regulation in order to finally get to not what we call hope, what they call nirvana, nothingness. We need Jesus as our guarantee. Edward Sells wrote The Faith of Islam and the Historical Development of the Quran. You'll find that these have been in hundreds of editions over the last century. And his conclusion about Islam was, Islam, when looked at from the Mohammedan standpoint, loses much of the beauty which is gathered around the ethical idea of complete submission to the will of God, and really emphasizes the external and legal side of religion. Muslim is a lot like John Kellogg. Follow the right ritual, eat the right stuff, do the right things, and maybe you'll be okay. But notice it's all external. It's not all about loving God. In fact, their statement in the Quran is submitting to God, or in a literal translation, submitting the neck to God. In the Middle Eastern world, the way you submitted in a peace treaty was that the leader got down on the ground and the conquering leader put their foot on the back of the neck of the one who was surrendering, to show that he had the power of life or death over the one that was surrendering. That was submission. And the Muslim faith, in the Quran itself, and in many stories about Muhammad talking to Gabriel in later traditions, the idea is the one who is true, the one who is right, is the one who gives the neck, surrenders the neck to God, surrenders to God and looks to do what God has commanded him to do. Now, we talk about surrender in the Christian worship, but it's not about being defeated by God. It's not about fearing God. It's not about being second-class citizens, prisoners of war. It's all about really and truly being in a loving relationship with God, something that you just don't feel in the other one. But the passage isn't quite through yet. It says, and by coming to us, he, Jesus, preached peace to you who were distant and to the ones who were near. Because through him, we both have access to the Father in one Spirit. So now, you're no longer outsiders with a visitor's visa, or resident aliens with a permanent visa, but you are co-citizens of the holy ones and the household of God. You are built upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, with the cornerstone being Jesus Christ himself. Purpose of the cornerstone is holding the walls in place on top of the foundation so that they don't fall off the foundation. We are built on the foundation of the apostles who preached the gospel, of the prophets who predicted Jesus' coming and said what God expected of humankind, and Jesus who pulled the apostles and the prophets together. The cornerstone. There was a famous French novelist by the name of André Gide. And André Gide decided to refer to the parable of the prodigal son, the two sons that Jesus told about. Remember, the younger son went and he wasted everything that he had, and he came back poor and stinky, and he said, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, or he wanted to say that, but the father met him. And before he could even say, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, the father says, no, let's get him cleaned up, let's get him dressed, let's have a party. But the elder son comes in, he says, you never gave a party for me. I've been doing the right thing all the time. But the father indicates that the son was doing it because the son thought he was supposed to, not because the son loved him. Well, in Gide's telling, the elder son complains about the celebration for the younger son, and the father tells the elder son, well, you go out and get some experience. And then you'll know how to really live life. Do you think that was the message that Jesus intended? He acts like, yeah, go out and sin so that you know what you got when you come back to God. No, I don't think that's what Jesus was teaching. But there are a lot of people in life who believe that experience is what people need. If you just get enough experience, if you get enough education, if you get enough reality in the world, then you will find life. But it wasn't the younger son's experience that gave him a new life. It was the Father's grace. The Father came running. Jesus Christ is the cornerstone. He's building a living building. Have you ever seen a disused, abandoned building, where the weeds have come in and went into the crevices of the mortar and began to break the stones and the bricks apart? That's what happens when you have a dead building. But with a living building, you can react and you can learn. What is the solution to avoiding the 100% God? It's not following rules. J.B. Phillips says it's learning to live and love in the Lord, who saved us by grace. The reason Protestant churches emphasize only Christ so much is because you cannot improve your position in terms of hope one bit by what you do. You can only improve your position by letting God do for you. The cornerstone. He holds it together. Without Christ and only Christ, you can't have salvation. We have a street full of people down here who think you can follow 5 basic rules and maybe get to paradise. We have a street full of people up here in this direction that think we have to keep living and living and living until we get it right. And it's what we do. We have a congregation of God's people here who know better. And it's time that God's people became so welcoming, so inclusive, so open, so forgiving, that the dividing wall between those who've grown up in the church and those who haven't is demolished. So the dividing wall between those who have served God for a long time and those who are just coming to God for the first time is demolished. Divide that wall and build up